So this morning, going through the A plus information for the CompTIA A plus exam, I am in what they call choosing a hard drive, and they talk about HDD hard disk having many different components. They go through platters, tracks, sectors, clusters, and cylinders, and explain what each one of those is. And so we'll take a look here in Google Chrome, and we even have some different pictures here we can look at. Just a second. Let it load. This seems like a pretty decent picture to look at, because they explain platters, and here in the picture you can see the metal platters in the hard drive, and that's where the information is stored on these metallic discs. So they're able to record information on both sides, and they have a unique ID. And then there's what is called a track, and a track are different tracks on each side of the platter. We can probably take a look at that. Let's see here. Hard disk tracks. We'll look at tracks and sectors, because sectors is in there as well. Let's go look at a decent picture here. So you have all these different rings, and each of the rings is a track, and a sector is just a small area of the track. Okay, it's broken down into sectors. Let's see about this picture. This might explain it. Like you can see here in the blue, and where each little section is, it's kind of like a piece of a pie. That's what a sector is. Okay, and it consists of 512 bytes. It's the smallest area of information, and they go all around the platter. Okay, so you have all these little sectors, which are like pieces of pie going around the single platter, and then the rings are all tracks. Alright, and then there's also what's called a cluster, and a cluster is multiple slices of the pie, the sector. So say like 3 sectors, right? 3 pieces of the pie, and some information is stored on all 3. That's called a cluster. Okay, and a cylinder is a track on both sides of all the platters. Okay, so say you take a track, right, one of the rings that goes around, and you have 3 platters, right, and on both sides of each platter you can store information. So each of the platters, say you have 3 platters in the hard drive, and so that means a total of 6 sides, right, and all having tracks. So say track 1, the circle going around, right, on both sides of all the platters. That is what's called a cylinder, and that's what they're referring to. So that's different explanations. They're talking about the hard drive, and then they talk about the read-write head. We can look at that in a second here. We'll go back. To this picture, and this picture is really good. You can see here they talk about, okay, the slider and head. In the picture, if you see over here, slider and head, and then actuator arm. That's the read-write head, and it sits one or 10 millionths of an inch just above the platter. So it's not even touching the platter. And so that's very awesome. 10 millionths of an inch. That's really cool. So but then they explain stuff about the arm, the actuator, and a little bit about disk performance for the hard drive. And so they have what's called seek time, latency, access time, and spindle speed. And seek time is time it takes for the read-write head to move from one track to another track, and then it's measured in milliseconds. So it doesn't take it very long. It goes and finds the information. Just moves, back and forth. So latency, this is another term, is measured in milliseconds as well. It is the time it takes a sector to rotate under the read-write head. So they're talking about the platter spinning in a circle until it reaches the arm, and usually it's like on an average half the speed, because it usually only has to rotate around half the distance to reach the head. So that is what they're talking about in latency. And then the next term is access time. And access time is the seek time of the read-write head to move back and forth to find a certain track or area, and the latency time, the time it takes to spin the platter under the read-write head. Those both create the access time. Okay, it contains the seek time and latency time, and describes the speed of the disk. Okay, and then last they talk about spindle speed. It is the revolutions per minute the platter rotates, so it's RPMs. So that platter, it spins all the time, and it spins on a usual hard drive about 5,400 times per minute, revolutions per minute. Okay. Otherwise, you can get higher end hard drives that go all the way up to maybe 15,000 revolutions per minute, and they're just a lot faster speed. But now we even have SSD hard drives, and I think those are even a lot faster. So you don't have any moving parts to have to worry about that kind of speed in that area. So next we'll move on to the MBR, which is called the master boot record. And the master boot record is actually what I had up here first. Here we go. Master boot record, right? And the master boot record sits, if you look at this picture of the hard drive, on the first sector of the platter. And it's just it doesn't take up a lot of information. It's just maybe like 100 bytes, 512 bytes here. Yeah, 512 bytes there of information that contains the boot code. So this is a special code to boot up the operating system on your computer, and is used to start the operating system. Also, the hard drive, it stores hard drive characteristics like the size of the hard drive and the layout of the hard drive, so it's able to find the information. It's like the size, location, and partitions of the hard drive. If you have different partitions, it'll know where they are because it's stored on this MBR, the master boot record. Okay, so we'll move on from there. They have also what's called sector translation. I guess originally hard drives were only theoretically to go up to maybe 500 gigabytes, and that was the original specification for hard drives. And so the sector translation, it just tricks the BIOS into understanding the drive geometry a little bit differently. So we can have larger hard drives like 1 terabyte, 2 terabyte, 3 terabyte. There's two types of sector translation, LBA and ECHS. At the moment I don't know the definitions of each of those, but it's not really important. They're just two different types of sector translations, like two different languages, made by two different companies of hard drive makers. So if you have a hard drive that's made by Western Digital, it uses LBA sector translation, and that's just what they use to trick the BIOS into understanding the hard drive to be different size if it's bigger than 500 gigabytes. Or they use ECHS if you have a Seagate hard drive. So it just depends what company you have for hard drives. So next they went on to see the BIOS motherboard. Oh, they wanted you to make sure that you have, when you're make sure the BIOS and or firmware on the hard drive controller match the standards used by the drive. So you install different hard drives and you want to make sure you have the right BIOS, the right firmware for your hard drive controller, and also the right motherboard to understand all of this. They said modern BIOSes use auto detection to configure ATA drives automatically. So newer hard drives, you probably plug it in and the BIOS figures it out and then it understands it right away. If it doesn't, then you might have to install different BIOS controllers for your hard drive, or set up a few different configurations within the BIOS to get your hard drive going, and or in the motherboard or operating system. So adapters can be used for legacy motherboards. Okay, so different adapters, different connections. Say if you had a PATA connection, and you can get a PATA adapter for SATA, or I guess vice versa. So older motherboards and new hard drive issues. It says install new BIOS or upgrade motherboard. So if you have an old motherboard and just check the BIOS, or you might have to upgrade your motherboard if there's no new firmware. The BIOS information that will help you. Then you just have to get a new motherboard if you have a desktop. Considerations for motherboards. Well, they should say considerations for hard drives. Drive capacity, spindle speed, average seek time, and interface standard and cache or buffer size. So these are a few more terms when considering to get a newer hard drive. How to buy one. So you could look at just drive capacity. If you need 500 gigabytes, or if you need a terabyte or more, it all depends upon your needs. Looking at the interface standard, what standard is your computer using? Is it using PATA, or is it using SATA revision 2 or revision 3? Then you look at your spindle speed, looking at what we talked about before. And spindle speed is the revolutions per minute of the hard drive. So how fast is your hard drive going in rotations per minute? And if you buy a typical one, probably about 5,400 RPMs per minute, and you can move up from there, get a little more expensive. But it will improve the speed of your hard drive if you get a faster revolutions per minute. The cache, sometimes a higher end hard drive may have some stored cache up to 2 megabytes, and that cache memory will help you. It's just very fast static memory that holds some information for your computer, for your hard drive to help speed up times. And then there's also what's called the average seek time. So we'll go into there and look at that later. Going under and looking at hard drives versus SSD, you can see the difference between a hard drive having moving parts and an SSD does not. It's all just solid state memory. And then they'll have different connections. Your SSD can have a PATA connection, which is an older connection, or it can have a SATA connection up to 6 gigabytes per second as well. Next, we'll take a look at a new standard in SSD drives where you can put your memory, instead of just on a hard drive using a SATA or a PATA connection, you can actually attach it directly to the motherboard using a PCI Express slot. Then you're not bottlenecked by your SATA connection or your PATA connection, and it will just go straight to, you're attached directly to the motherboard, so your times are much faster. But this is new technology, and with new technology you're paying a new price for it. The prices are coming down. They've been out for a few years now, but they're still very expensive compared to an SSD hard drive. And even if you were comparing an SSD hard drive to a standard hard drive with disk platter that had moving parts, comparing the prices between those are generally more expensive in the SSD hard drives. But they also do have what's called a hybrid drive now, where they have part SSD flash memory and then also a hard disk drive. So you have a combination of both, helping you just speed up your computer a little bit. So it's really up to you which way you want to go, how fast you need your information coming to you. And throughout the history of a computer, many things have upgraded. The motherboards have upgraded speed, the RAMs have upgraded speed for the computer, the processors, many different things just with motherboards and RAM, and the CPUs have been upgraded. But throughout the years, just until recently, the past 5 or more years, we finally started upgrading hard drives a lot faster than before, having just a standard platter drive. So you can see the hard drive is really was slowing the computer down a lot more, but is giving us a lot more upgrade now in speeds with this new technology, and helping things run a lot smoother. So this is my class for the A+, choosing a hard drive. Also look at, if you're studying for the A+ certification, go to professormesser.com or freeaplus.com, and you can check out James Messer's videos on A+. I think that's the best place to go to learn information on your certification. All the videos there are free and very well done in a professional quality. So enjoy, keep studying, and thank you for listening.